One, this is update for May 28, 2023, day 459 of the war and of the date update. This is also catch up for May 27, 2023. As always, I'm going to start with strategic updates, and then we're going to switch to the situation in Ukraine. So first, Turkey, probably everybody knows, current Turkish president has won elections very narrowly. Looks like the country is pretty divided. The most important part is this means that the status quo remains, which means Turkey is gonna be a main gateway to Russia for all of these black and gray imports that Russia needs, including technology-wise. In exchange, Russia will allow this grain deal to continue. Probably Russia will not get export of ammonia and its own agriculture. We'll see. As I mentioned before, this current version of grain deal expires on July 18, and it will be actually very critical for Ukrainian agriculture because the harvest season starts around that time exactly, starting, let's say, probably mid or early July, and so there will be a lot of grain that needs to be exported coming in July, August, and September. And so it will be critical for Ukraine to extend the grain deal, which looks like it's going to be extended. Ukrainian president congratulated, Turkish president, Russian president congratulated, Turkish president, which again, as I said, is the Turkish president can give masterclass, political masterclass of how to basically manipulate everyone and ensure that everyone does what you want. Actually, even U.S. president congratulated Turkish president, even though Turkish president is openly and I would say aggressively speaks against the U.S. and specifically current U.S. president and its policies. So, so he is definitely a gifted politician. However, as economist, he is terrible, and he brought essentially Turkey on the brink of disaster. We'll find out what happens after market knows that he won election. The market already negatively reacted before in expectation that he's going to win, but there might be some sort of follow-on reaction. And regardless, his power will be tested due to economical shocks that Turkey probably will experience till towards the end of the summer, early fall. So we'll find out. I have big doubts that he is going to be able to manage Turkish economy in a way that sort of avoids the crisis, which it's already in a terrible shape, as I said. And this is mostly due to his empire building aspirations, as I said before. Then let's switch a little bit to other country, Belarus. As I said before, this is essentially extension of Russia, similar to, like, for example, North Korea is extension of China. As I mentioned in previous video, Russia puts nuclear weapons in Belarus now. Then it supplemented that with S-400. This is anti-air defense systems, which is very logical. So at this point, effectively, Belarus is, from military perspective, but it's just becoming much more obvious that it's extension of Russia, and it gives Russia sort of some kind of in the center, some kind of buffer relative to the West, let's put it this way. Then let's switch to the favorite topic, which is China and what's happening there. So first of all, China continuing to refuse to talk to the US. There won't be any conversation between US Minister of Defense and Chinese. I think there's some kind of meeting early June, on June 2nd, I think. They're not gonna talk. So basically, Chinese political leadership refuses to talk to the U.S. For obvious reasons. There is nothing to discuss there. Everybody understands where each side stands. At the same time, as I said before, I mentioned this, that China actually hit U.S., I would say pretty painfully, by banning micron technology chips in China. So I want to explain a little bit more. So first of all, they are memory chips. They're commodity, so they're not like something advanced. And so China can have its own, or from South Korea. And so they basically pushed out U.S. company. And the painful part for the U.S. is that Micron Technology is the largest producer of memory chips in the U.S. And this will result in a loss of revenue that's equivalent to about 8 to 9% of the annual revenue for Micron Technology. To add even more to this whole difficulty of this situation is that company is in extremely difficult financial situation. So just to kind of give you understanding, in the latest quarter, which for them, I think it's ends on March 2nd or March 3rd, and basically it's winter. That's the latest quarter. And so their costs to produce those memory chips were higher than the revenues that they received. So the revenue was 3.7 billion. The costs were 4.9 billion, which just means it's a disastrous situation. The company is effectively bankrupt, and losing another 8 to 9% of revenue puts sort of nail in the coffin of this company, which means that U.S. government probably will need to bail this out. So it's big financial with unknown prospect. That's another big point here. Or let it go bankrupt, but then U.S. will lose largest producer of memory chips in the U.S., which again goes back to the whole idea that it makes it even worse. U.S. is becoming more dependent on whatever Taiwan or South Korea, which could be in a war zone. And while this memory chips, they are not nothing advanced, they're critical for any computer system, as you can imagine, because that's memory. So again, situation is kind of China very hit US in very, very calculated way, and I would say very painful way. And the result, US Commerce Secretary was saying that US will not tolerate ban on micron technology chips, but at the same time there is nothing US can do. The same as China cannot do anything on the ban of exporting advanced semiconductors to China from the US. So as you can see, this the spiral of this war is sort of I would say oscillating more and more wildly. Let's put this way, which is obviously not a good sign. Then there was a poll in China, and I understand what many viewers will say. Okay, this might be sort of not indicative of the true situation. I probably agree with you, but that's the best we have. So there is at least some information on Chinese population, of how they perceive things in outside world. So the poll was focused on how Chinese are perceiving this whole political and military situation in the world. So they answered that 60 of them view US as unfavorable country, which is, I would say, not surprising because of Taiwan and probably internal propaganda. It's actually what is surprising that US was viewed even more unfavorable than Japan, which is Japan is sort of traditional natural competitor of China, and they have very bad memories from the 30s, where Japan did a lot of let's say military atrocities in China. and so there's very negative feeling towards China. But actually, what is interesting that 58% of population feels negative towards Japan, while 60 towards the U.S. Russia got 8% unfavorable rating, which is obviously not surprising. Again, China and Russia and Iran are effectively allies. This is sort of not formally sort of formalized in illegal papers, but effectively de facto this is alliance. But it's very interesting. Another interesting piece of information that 45% of this Chinese population who were polled, they expect that the relationship between China and U.S. will improve in the near future. 30% think they will remain the same, and 25% that they will get worse. So very interesting. I'm not sure what's the logic, in those people, but we'll see what happens. We'll see if the masses are correct. Then another sort of piece of information, question. The question was who's responsible for war in Ukraine, or in other words, Russia's aggression against Ukraine. And there, 80% blamed U.S. plus rest of the West. Then, the interesting point that it's 12% blamed Ukraine, and only 8% blamed Russia. So as you can see, this is your propaganda at work. At the same time, it's very clear that maybe this is my opinion, that Chinese society really lacks morals. There's definitely no understanding of morality, and it's probably cultural difference between, let's say, West and China, and it's a huge gap that I think will never be crossed in many ways. But think this way, that 2/3 of Chinese population blames Ukraine for the war, and only third blames Russia for the war. So again, very interesting, sort of not interesting, but I think very revealing. How to say, revealing in terms of understanding Chinese population and how they perceive the world, and their sort of, or let's say, lack of moral compass there as a whole. But it is what it is. That's just reality that needs to be sort of lived with. The other small piece of information is that Russian crude oil export reached peak, and it's at 8.3 million barrels per day. Looks like there is a tension between Saudi Arabia and Russia regarding curbing crude oil exports. So obviously Russia doesn't want to do it because they really desperately need revenues, because effectively that's the only commodity where they get high margin, first of all, a commodity where they get a lot of foreign exchange reserves, the ones that they don't really like, US dollars and euros. That allows Russia to stay afloat, and Russian government specifically. One other important piece of information I want to, and also to add about the Russia's situation with all of this energy. So I mentioned that Russia is exporting 8.3 million barrels per day of crude oil. I want to make it very clear, it's just crude oil, right? Because Russia is extracting about 11 million barrels per day. That's the total production in Russia. So as you can see, a huge majority of it is being exported. And even inside of Russia, there is shortage of gasoline, and prices for gasoline are going higher. They are slightly less than $1 per liter. I think it's about like 85 cents per liter there. This is wholesale price, so probably the retail price is closer to $1. But So as you can see, the Russian government is trying to sort of squeeze everything they can out of Russia to export as much as they can to get as much revenue from those exports, even at the expense of sort of internal consumer. Then the last piece of information that I actually forgot to mention, and this is very relevant to the U.S.-China relationship, is that I think his advisor or aide to the head of Department of State, who is responsible for the U.S. policy with respect to China, he's leaving the State Department of State, which in a bureaucratic language, it probably means that there is a failure there, and he is basically asked to leave. So again, as you can see, things are not going well inside, U.S. government, and they realize that. Now let's switch to the situation in Ukraine on the ground. So the most important part is that Russian military command is desperately trying to disrupt, derail, delay, whichever way they can, upcoming Ukrainian offensive. And for the past 2 nights, there were large. One of them was the largest attacks using missiles, Iranian drones, UAVs. Against Ukrainian logistical infrastructure, against their ammunition depots, against their fuel depots, everything that sort of helps fuels offensive, everything was attacked. Don't know success of those attacks, to which extent it is successful. We'll find out, but as I said, Russian military command is desperately trying to delay or disrupt or reduce the strength of the offensive as much as they can, which also means that the offensive is around the corner, as they say, is coming up somewhere sometime soon. That doesn't mean it's going to happen tomorrow. That's not what I'm saying, but within very short time window, I don't know, probably a week, maybe 2 weeks, I believe. And also, there are also reports of there's a lot of equipment coming still from Europe, including from Sweden, which is donating, I think, 50 CV90s, which are probably so far one of the better IFEs that Ukraine is getting, along with Bradleys, because this M111, 113, this is, to be honest, is military junk. The same as Leopard 1, which is, again, Ukraine will get those, but that is complete military junk. The same as what was T-55S that Ukraine got from Slovenia. This is also military junk. There's quite a bit of military junk that Ukraine unfortunately gets. And the problem with all of this is that Ukraine does not have large pool of human reserves. Investing them by putting them in this military junk and essentially reducing their chances of survival diminishes chances of Ukraine's ability to win in this war, which I said before, it's, nothing is predetermined. Ukraine can win, the same as Russia can win. It really depends on what each side does and effectiveness and efficiency. And getting military junk reduces your, obviously, effectiveness, efficiency. It reduces, not to mention that Ukrainian troops don't get enough of, there are organizational limitations within the Ukrainian army. As I said, it's still Soviet army. And then if you add basically fuel to fire by giving military junk, it makes things even more worse. That doesn't mean that Russian army is better. It's the same Soviet army, as I said before. Now let's quickly walk through the front line to see what's happening in a clockwise fashion, as I always do. So the situation along the state border remains very tense. There's actions on the both sides. Probably will not stop, will not go down till the offensive. Now let's jump to the North Lugansk front line. Things here are quiet. There are basically tactical skirmishes, but that's really nothing major here. Now let's move. And as I said before, this is not sort of strategic section of the front line. Now let's move to the North Donbass. North Donbass is essentially also becoming quiet. Is quiet. There are some actions by Russian military here, but they are sort of more of a painting the picture rather than real, true attacks. There's also push, the same on Ukrainian side, pretty weak push straight south of Bakhmut with this, as I said, mentioned before, this delusional idea of attempt to encircle Bakhmut, but by literally hitting straight north and straight south of Bakhmut, which will never materialize, will never work with the current resources and with the current idea and with the current organization. And then Russian troops trying to counterattack, but it's turned into sort of similar tactical skirmishes to what's going on North Lugansk front line here. Now let's move to the central Donbass. Things here again, as I said, also quiet. Nothing is going on in the typical areas, which is Pisky salient and this around Avdiivka. It's all quiet. I mean, again, tactical skirmishes always happen. There's no shortage of that everywhere. Then the only active area is this Marinka, where Russian troops continuing their attacks. But this is nothing sort of major, sort of typical non-stop attacks that's been happening here since February 24, 2022. And then situation on the Zaporizhya front line is quiet. Nothing is going on there at this moment. So as you can see, both sides, it's like, like how you call it, quiet before the storm, or I don't know what's the best expression there, but effectively both sides are preparing for the sort of final, or not the final, but for the major fight that's coming up. And so the things are sort of quieting before they will get really, really loud on the front line. Thanks for watching. Until next time. Bye-bye.